We're going to go ahead and talk about Dionysus. So, so we'll go ahead and begin. Hi, Terry. Okay. All right. Constantly accompanied by his troops of Maenads and satyrs, Dionysus was a god reveling in ecstatic celebration, dancing with his devotees within dark forests and upon open glades. Dionysus became intimately associated with the seasons, the natural processes of life and death and renewal of life once more. As he lived in the spring and the summer, died by winter, rose again with the following spring. We're going to be investigating that shortly. So he became understood as a god of resurrection. Many believed that Dionysus could rise again. Maybe so could they, holding fast that participating in his sacred energies held the key. But what exactly were these mysteries, and how do they influence the history of Western religious thought? And how does Christianity fit into the picture? And so for the most part, scholars at least agree that Dionysus was usually depicted as a god of wine, of fertility, and of vegetation. Dionysus is intimately associated with the seasons, with the processes, as I mentioned, of life and death, and the return to life so woven within the natural realm. Hence, hence he is a god of renewal. He is the God of the promise of new life. He is the God of resurrection. Now, what happens is this, is that still Dionysus seems to be a contradiction in many ways. He's hard to place. He's hard to define. He's hard to pin down. And so you're going to hear a myriad of voices of my own, hopefully not coming just from me, a myriad of voices of scholars having a very deep disagreement of trying to understand who Dionysus was or was to be understood as. And I kind of have to laugh because I think Dionysus would be laughing at that too. that he has entered into the realm of liminal spaces, places that are not something that is fully understood, not civilized, not pasteurized. So you would, so be it. So, in fact, Carl Carini, a very famous scholar, notes that no other god of the Greeks is as widely present in the moments of nature of Greece and Italy as this sensuous tradition of antiquity as Dionysus. And yet, he is so hard to define. So let's go into the origins of this mysterious god. And much of the evidence points to the fact that this deity comes from fertility cults like Tammuz from the ancient East. Let's take a look at the first image. Okay, so Tammuz, also known as Dmuzit, was a Sumerian shepherd god and the consort of Inanna or Ishtar. As his wedding gift to her, Tammuz brought her pails of milk yoked over his shoulders. Now, according to one version, let's go to the next image, one version of the central Mesopotamian myth, Inanna, the consort of Tammuz, decided to journey into the underworld, possibly to claim this realm as her own. But in order to pass below, she was required to offer either one of her articles of clothing or one of her pieces of jewelry before each of the seven gates as she descended, stripping her of her powers gradually, hence, of course, her immortality in the process, making her as defenseless, as a human. At the time, Ereshkigal was mourning the loss of her consort, Gugulana, also known as the Bull of Heaven, and seemed distracted enough in her grief to allow Inanna to sit on her unoccupied throne. Her actions, however, did not escape notice of the other Mesopotamian gods. the Anunnaki, who judged her, took her life from her, and hung her on a meat hook. Tammuz sought to release his consort from the underworld, with only Enki, lord of the earth, responding, with the only way for Tammuz to rescue her was to sacrifice himself in exchange. His descent into the underworld to pay the price for her impiety was considered equitable, and so he descends. He dies, in a sense, while his consort Inanna is resurrected. In one variant version, it was Inanna who realized that the only way she was going to get out was to find another god who could take her place in the underworld, and chose her own consort, especially when she found out that he was sitting on her throne. And so, sending, of course, she sent demons to the upper world to force him to descend. So, in some cases, it's a voluntary sacrifice. In others, it's more compulsive. Well, meanwhile, his sister, this is, of course, Tammuz's sister, by the name of Gestinia, attempted to save him from his fate, but failed. In any case, there is mourning at the loss of Tammuz, especially by his sister, and in some versions, his consort Inanna, as he becomes known as the dying god. Eventually, a deal is made, with Tammuz occupying the underworld for 6 months of the year, and then resurrecting for the next 6 months, beginning in the spring, with his sister Gestinia taking his place for the next 6 months in the underworld, as Inanna declares, "You, Tamuzi, half the year. Your sister Gestinia, half the year," unquote. And so, like Dionysus, Tammuz was a dying and resurrecting god that did indeed follow the seasons. A little bit of fun trivia here. According to Justin Martyr and other early Christian sources, Justin Martyr was a Christian apologist who lived during the 2nd century. It is interesting to note that he mentions, this is a Christian source, he mentions that the site where Jesus was born in Bethlehem became a cave dedicated to Tammuz. Just throwing that one in for free to get you guys thinking. Okay, so let's go to the next image. Oh, there you go. This right here, it's a pretty good image here of Inanna, and you can see there in all her mightiness, being very happy to be out in the upper world, having sold out her consort, Tammuz, to linger either all the time or at least part of the year in the underworld. Let's go to the next image. Here we go. The earliest reference to the god Dionysus is from the Linear Bead tablets. That's from Pylos. This is in Crete, dated around 1250 BCE, which demonstrated that the Mycenaeans had already incorporated this god into their pantheon. These tablets refer to both Zeus and Dionysus as jointly receiving libations of honey. Sounds very sweet. From the Aegean Sea, the Dionysian cult spread to Thrace, according to ancient sources, and then, of course, finally reached Greece. So it is a gradual, and Thrace is another location that is popularly connected to Dionysus. Okay, so now let's go to the next image. This is interesting. Look at this image here. Looks like Dionysus is coming out of the thigh of Zeus. What is going on here? Well, I'm going to explain. Now, according to one version of the story, Dionysus was the son of Zeus and Semele. One myth tells how his mother, Semele, died before she could give birth to him. To keep him alive, Zeus took the infant Dionysus from his mother's womb and transferred it to his own thigh. After Dionysus was born from the leg of Zeus, He was entrusted in Hermes' care with a group of nymphs living on Mount Nyssa. Let's go to the next image. Mount Nyssa to raise the infant. Um, uh, Mount Nyssa is in Anatolia, Turkey today. Let's go to the next image. Uh, Down below, of course, of this great mountain is me. It's me. It is a city called Nyssa, and this is me at an ancient library they discovered at Nyssa, and I think that's pretty cool. Let's go to the next image. But Hera was jealous of Dionysus and sent the Titans to consume him, cutting him up into pieces and boiling his body. Only his heart remained unconsumed. And so Demeter, in one version of the myth, Athena or Rhea and others, saved it and gave it to Zeus, who recreated his son from the remaining organ. So what is this place? You're looking at this. Yes, I have been here. This is in southern Turkey. This is a city known as Perge, and this is the Fine Theater. In fact, it contains one of the best frieze depictions of the early life of Dionysus, showing a young Dionysus. Let's go to the next image. Young Dionysus with a wreath decorated with ivy leaves and pine cones placed on his shoulder-length curly hair, and seated upon a carriage harnessed by two panthers. So this particular image. I want to. Keep going. Also, in art, Dionysus is often shown as wearing wreaths of vines, riding felines, carrying a rod called a thrysis. Let's go to the next image. So here's a few images here of Dionysus. There's a thrysis right behind him. Let's go to the next image. There we go. There he is playing the pipes. Do you notice that young Dionysus does not have a beard? So typically, when it's a young one, he is shown as beardless. Um, he's sometimes shown as sailing on the sea as well. Let's go to the next image. And there he is with the thrysis again. That's a really good image. Let's go to the next image. Let's get little pictures of this. Okay. We'll put this down for a second. Let's see me for a second. And often he is depicted as having a fine set of wings, as you can imagine. Exactly. And now, we all over we find images of Dionysus, the beardless one, in various artifacts. For example, here is an image of Dionysus. Maybe you can see it a little bit there. Yeah, there you go. Image of Dionysus from this small little votive lamp. You can see right here, it is broken, but this is where the wick was contained, this little hole here. This is where the oil was placed, and this is a votive lamp that's dedicated to Dionysus, and you can see it is the beardless Dionysus with the long coiled hair there. And of course, this is absolutely a gift. It's ownership, so I do own it. Um, and this is from the area near Magnesia on the Meander. Uh, so you have these offerings. The idea is that you light this up because it doesn't give you that much light. It can't give you that much light. But just like a votive that you have today, you light it up, and this is an offering. Give this up, you offer this up, and hopefully Dionysus, who is the god of new life and protection, as well as fertility and all these different areas, will give you what you wish for. Dionysus was also asked to protect somebody when they did cross the sea. And so you do have depictions of Dionysus, as I mentioned before, crossing the seas, but also Dionysus can help you cross the sea. But make sure that if you get safely on the other side, that you light up another one of these as a thankful offering. And so there are so many of these little votive lamps in dedication to Dionysus. There you have that. I thought you may find that interesting in and of itself. Okay, let's go to the next image. Now, sarcophagus Interesting word, sarcophagus. What can that mean? Well, of course, sarke means flesh. The ophagus part means eater. So literally, a sarcophagus is a flesh eater. And so you're placed in there, and yeah, and things start to change. You go through this interesting transformation. Well, because Dionysus is connected to resurrection into new life, you're going to see all throughout the Greco-Roman world motifs that demonstrate various stories connected to Dionysus, and some of them have nothing to do with eternal life. Just the idea of having Dionysus on your sarcophagus connects to the idea that, hey, you will have a renewal. You'll have a new life. We'll go into more details of exactly what that is, but I just want you to be able to see how beautiful these particular pieces are. You can see him holding the thrices there. We also have Ariadne on it too as well. So let's go to the next image. Well, from vine to theater, Dionysus cultivated the root and inspired stage expression. Yes, Dionysus was also known as the god of drama, of theater. Some scholars claim this association was because of the fact that ancient myths attribute the invention of theater to satyrs, the constant attendance of the god. Doubtless, satyrs or satyrs played a big role in theater, finding themselves in a number of roles. Even the word tragedy itself in Greek means a goat song. The intoxicated revelries of Dionysus were called komos. And again, many scholars believe that this was the source of the word comedy. Okay, so intoxicated revelries, komos, and comedy. Can you hear it? Right? According to Aristotle, the origins of tragedy and comedy arrive from the Dionysian dithram and the phallic song. Phallus, we know what a phallus is, right? Of course, the chorus of these dramatic events often identified themselves with Dionysus, as well as the Maenads. So you have these interesting connections, right? One little further note, whenever they had festivities dedicated to Dionysus, they only had comedy and tragedy that would be performed, just those two kinds. For example, in Athens, Dionysus was the god of various contrasts. He was both the fierce male bull and the gentle, effeminate sage, with golden hair flowing in scented ringlets, his face flushed with wine, and his eyes lit with the charm of Aphrodite, as Euripides says in the Bacchae. He was human and animal. He was masculine and feminine. He was young and old. He was immortal. And yet sometimes he was cut off at his prime. Let's look at me for just a few moments. The story, as he was growing up, it is said that he discovers the grapevine. So that's according to Pseudo Apollodorus, as well as many others. In fact, there are stories of a love match between Dionysus and the youth Ampelos, the grapevine. And apparently, it didn't turn out the way it should, but maybe we should be grateful for that fact. Okay, so sorry. You wanted me here, right? Um, and there's another story where he was driven mad by Hera, which probably is not that unexpected because Hera had a certain way about making a lot of people mad. And so he wandered into Egypt and to Syria. There's stories that appear that connect him with similarities to the god Osiris, as well as the Phoenician god of wine. They're just because, well, Dionysus originated, much of the ideas of Dionysus originated from the East. And so, you couldn't help see these similarities. So, what do the ancient Greeks do, and as well as others from Asia Minor? We'll just make a story to show the connection, to show how they are put together. There's another story where he falls in love with the goddess of Beirut, Beiroi, as influenced by Eros. Eventually, Poseidon gets her, but there you have that. Um, he does go to India at one point. There is, in fact, he's part of a campaign against India and the Amazons. There's all these great, great stories. He was also taught the orgies, accordingly, by the goddess Rhea, or Rhea Kybele. Rhea and Kybele, these words are used interchangeably for this particular goddess of Phrygia. Pseudo Apollodorus says as follows. He says, after he went to Kybele of Phrygia, there he was purified by Rhea and taught the mystic rites of initiation, after which he received from her his gear and set out eagerly for Thrace. Um, there was indeed a connection between the orgastic cults of Dionysus in Greece and that of Kybele and Samotheus, that is in Asia Minor, that really needed to be addressed too. And so these stories kind of brought these together. Euripides kind of tells a bit more about this. He talks about the Corybantes of Kybele, he says, with thrice helmet invented for me in their caves, this circle, this castanet, covered with stretched hide, which is a tympanion, right? And in their excited revelry, they mingled it with the sweet breath of the Phrygian pipes and handed it over to Mother Rhea, resounding with the sweet songs of the Bacchae. Nearby raving satyrs were fulfilling the rites of the mother goddess, and they joined into the dances of the festivals in which Dionysus rejoices. So, yeah, there's a lot of stories. In fact, was I putting this together, I was going, there's way too many stories. If I told all the stories of Dionysus, and I would be here not just all night, I'd be here morning and into the next night. So we're not doing that. So we're kind of going on the mountain peaks, so to speak. So one of the main mountain peaks I want to climb is this idea of resurrection. Because I brought that up in the beginning, so I might as well continue with that, right? So, as a dying and resurrecting deity, Dionysus was quite familiar with the realm of the underworld. One of the stories related to this theme involves his mother, Semele, and as discussed, Zeus fell in love with this mortal woman and visited her secretly in the guise of an eagle. That's Zeus, right? Eventually impregnating her with Dionysus. Hera, as the very jealous wife of Zeus, was not pleased at all when she heard about the affair and appeared to Semele in the form of an old crone, acting as if she wished to become her friend, and as friends do, to share their secrets. Semele told Hera, in the form of a crone, that her lover was none other than Zeus himself. Hera acted like she did not believe her. No, that can't be true. But Semele kept on insisting it was true. Hera. Yet after a while, Semele began to be uncertain herself, not sure whether Zeus was really her lover or not. And so when he appeared to her, he asked him to grant her one favor, swearing to do so upon the sacred waters of Styx itself. Will you promise? Oh, no. He quickly agreed. Yeah, I'll do it. Yeah, well, But when she asked that he should reveal himself in all his glory directly to her, Zeus tried to get out of the deal, warning her that this was a very bad idea, attempting to convince her to ask instead for maybe some small signs of power, like seeing one of his smallest lightning bolts. Over that. But she insisted, and so Zeus revealed herself, himself, excuse me, in all his glory, a power no mortal can survive. The result, Semele was instantly consumed in flames. Now Dionysus sought to free his mother from her fate in the underworld, believing her death unfair because it was, after all, by Hera's deception. And so and I totally get that. I totally understand that. Okay, so there you have it. But but of course, let's go to the next part. Um, let's go next image. Show a few images here, but oh, I want to before I go there. Here's some good pictures of Dionysus. Let's go through this one. That's good. Let's go to the next picture. There's another picture of Dionysus without the beard. Very good. Next image. There's another one. You can see part of the delta there, right? Go to the next image. Yeah, well, this is what happened. Yeah. You don't want to see Zeus in all his glory. All right, so there we're caught up there. Let's go to the next image. So to save his mom, um, Dionysus needed a guide and found him in a shepherd by the name of Prosimnus, who lived along Lake Alconian, a body of water considered bottomless because it was believed to have an underwater entrance to the realm of the dead. Um, you know, Lake Alconian was located on the Peloponnesian Peninsula, south of Argos, but it has kind of dried up, but there's a remnant left, and you're looking at it. So here's the remnant. It's kind of turned into like a little swamp, not really seemingly the bottomless lake that was described in ancient times. But hey, let's as you look at this pond, let's hear Pausanias and his description of this mighty lake. Uh, he says, there is no limit to the depth of the Alconian lake, and I know of nobody who, by any contrivance, has been able to reach the bottom of it since not even Nero, who had ropes made several stades long and fastened them together, tying lead to them and omitting nothing that might help his experiment, was able to discover any limit to its depth. This too I heard, the water of the lake is to all appearances calm and quiet, but although it's such to look at, every swimmer who ventures to cross is dragged down, sucked into the depths, and swept away, says Pausanias. Yeah, today he'd maybe just be sinking in mud. Next image. Yeah. So, by the way, that's the ocean beyond. Ironically, the lake actually did silt up in the 19th century and is nowhere to be found today. So much for being bottomless. The lake was believed to be the home to let's next image, Lernaean Hydra, a serpentine water monster with multiple snake-like heads. If someone cut off one of the heads, two magically grew in its place. Yet the Hydra could be killed if all the heads were cut off before they regenerated. And Hercules managed to do this in his second labor. More importantly, Lake Iconium was the site of special ancient mysteries dedicated to Demeter, making the lake sacred both to the Greek earth goddess and Dionysus in association with the underworld. So this is well, was the lake that led to the underworld, where he wants to go and save his mother. Um, yeah, let's look at me for a little bit here. Okay, so what happens is this: he's going to retrieve. So Dionysus went on board the shepherd's boat, as he rowed out to the center of the lake, to the approximate location that was directly over the entrance to Hades. Now, Prosimenus loved Dionysus, and he betrayed his secret of the entrance for one special request, that upon his return from the underworld, Dionysus would make love to him. Different versions of the story follow. In one story, Dionysus takes so long in the underworld that Prosimon was deceased upon his return. In another version, Dionysus returned, and while Prosimnus waited for the fulfillment of his vow, the god of wine either completely forgot him or intentionally delayed so he would die before he had to owe up. In any case, gods and humans were still subject to their vows, even if they were not quite fulfilled in the way originally intended. And so Dionysus went to his tomb, found a piece of wood, carved it into the shape of a phallus, and, well, sat upon it there and so fulfilled his promise. Okay, these stories, right? As for his mom, Pseudo Apollodorus asserts in the 2nd century, says as follows: He, Dionysus, retrieved his mother from Hades' realm, gave her the name Thyone, and escorted her up to the sky. Well, that sounds like a pretty good resurrection story, right? According to Diodorus Siculus in the 1st century BCE, Dionysus was able to save his mother via his own powers of regeneration. The myths relate that Dionysus brought up his mother, Semele, from Hades, and that sharing with her her own immortality, he changed her name to Thyone. That's a quote from the 1st century BCE. So, yeah, there's a good news there, right? The Greek traveler Pausanias had difficulty fathoming that Zeus would even permit his love to be killed in the first place, saying in his description of Greece, written in the 2nd century, in the temple of Artemis at Troizenos in Argolis are altars to the gods said to rule under the earth. It is here that they say Semele was brought out of Hades by Dionysus, and that Hercules dragged up the hounds of Hades. But I cannot bring myself to believe even that Semele died at all, seeing that she was the wife of Zeus, unquote. From this reference, we know the Greeks believed that while Dionysus entered Hades by way of Lake Iconium, he returned with Semele at Trozenos near Argos. Now, as early as the 5th century BCE, that's pretty long earlier, Pindar writes as if the entire matter of Semele's death was over and her current immortality assumed as a reality. Remember, in this talk, we are focusing a lot on the resurrection aspects connected to Dionysus. So I'm going to read what Pindar has to say. He says, such is the tale told of the fair-throned maids of Cadmos who suffered mightily, but heavy woe falls before greater good. With the immortals, Semele of the flowing locks lives still, who died in the roar of thunder, and Pallas, Athena, loves her ever, and Zeus no less, and dearly too the ivy-bearing Dionysus her son, unquote. Another early source, Hesiod and his Theogony, now we're going back to the late 8th or early 7th century BCE, comments on Semele's happy ending as well. I mean, we're really going in there, right? He says, and Semele, daughter of Cadmos, was joined with him in love with Zeus, and bare him a splendid son, joyous Dionysus, a mortal woman, and an immortal son. And now they both are gods, unquote. The ancients believed mother and son were literally together in the heavens. Wow. Nonnus, writing in the 5th century CE, now we're going the other direction, almost 1,000 years later, right? He says, Semele did mount into the heaven to touch one table with Zeus and the blessed, to sight beside her son Dionysus of the vine. Wow, of course. Dionysus could not have saved his mother at all without Zeus's permitting it, right? As Nonnus writes as follows, he says, Zeus was able to change the mind of jealous Hera, to claim and undo the savage threatening resentment with which burdened her. Semele, consumed by the fire, he translated into the starry vault. He gave the mother of Bacchus a home in the sky amongst the heavenly inhabitants as one of Hera's family. I'm sure she loved that. As daughter of Harmonia, sprung from both Ares and Aphrodite. So her new body bathed in the purifying fire. There's a break in the text here, Lacuna. And it says, she received the immortal life of the Olympians instead of Cadmos, and the soul of earth instead of Atone and Agave. She found Artemis by her side. She had converse with Athena. She received the heavens as her wedding gift, sitting at one table with Zeus and Hermes and Ares and Aphrodite. Unquote. Now, I'm looking at this and I'm going through this. And I'm going, well, oh, okay, yeah, I get the point. She's immortal now. She goes to, oh, yeah. This is a little different, right? Because what happens, this is a different kind of resurrection. This resurrection is not the kind of resurrection where you're kind of going, into this. There's no underworld concept here, right? There's no, here's Tartarus on this side, and you have the Elysium place, on the other side. This is being amongst the stars, but not just the stars, but it seems to me that she is still herself able to commune conversations with the various gods and goddesses. This is a real big resurrection story that is unusual, but and moves in a very strong vertical fashion, going straight up. Okay. But Dionysus was not only known to have saved his mother, but his lover. So this is gets a little bit interesting, right? Ariadne. And so as Seneca writes, not alone has Bacchus, Dionysus himself, or Semele's mother or Bacchus attained the skies, but also the heavens wear the crown of the Cretan maid, Ariadne. Wow, okay. Many legends surround Ariadne. Most agree that she was the daughter of King Minos of Crete, most likely revealing an ancient Minoan provenance for the story. In this story, she helps King Theseus defeat the Minotaur. Let's go to the next image. Who is a great beast residing in a labyrinth, who fed upon the flesh of sacrifices of young men. Oh, this is just a nice picture here of Semele and Dionysus together. Let's go to the next image. There we go. This is more of a medieval, but I think this it's appropriate. In this story, she helped King Theseus defeat the Minotaur, as I said, a great beast who resided in a labyrinth, who fed upon flesh sacrifices of the young men and women. According to Pseudo Apollodorus, Theseus was on the list of the third tribute to the Minotaur. Some days he actually volunteered. Um, Ariadne pleaded with Daedalus to tell her the way out of the labyrinth. Following his instructions, she gave Theseus a ball of thread as he entered. He fastened this to the door and let it trail behind him as he went in. He came across the Minotaur. Let's go next image. In the furthest section of the labyrinth, killed him with jabs of his fist, and then made his way out again by pulling himself along the thread. Ovid also notes that Theseus, the faithless son of Aegeus, followed the guiding thread and escaped from the winding house through the aid of my sister Ariadne gave. Ariadne then fled Crete with Theseus, but Theseus betrayed her. There are various versions of how he did so. In one, the king abandoned her on the island of Naxos, next image, while she was sleeping, and it was here that Dionysus first found her and fell in love. I think this is kind of a great image there. I think this is, I think Theseus is just taking off there in his boat. Next image, as early as the 8th century BCE, Homer in the Odyssey states, Ariadne, that daughter of subtle Minos, whom Theseus bore off from Crete towards the hill of sacred Athens. Yet he had no joy of her, since before that could be, she was slain by Artemis in the Isle of Naxos because of the witness of Dionysus. Here, in this version of the story, she was killed in the presence of Dionysus by Artemis, but the story would develop to where he rescues her from the island and actually marries her before her death, as recorded by Pseudo Apollodorus in the 2nd century, who says Dionysus fell in love with Ariadne, let's go next image, and kidnapped her from Naxos, taken her off to Lemnos, next image, where he had sex with her and begot Theos, Stapholos, Oenopion, and Peritheris. So there you have it. Next image. There we go. The purple robe of Dionysus and Ariadne used to lay upon as their marriage was considered sacred. Polydorus Rhodius writes, a purple robe with the divine Charites had made with their own hands for Dionysus in sea-girt Naxos. Later, Dionysus gave it to his son Thoas. Thoas left it to Hypsiphates, and she, with many other pieces of finery, gave it to Jason, Jason the Argonauts, as a parting gift. It was a work of art, a joy forever, as pleasing to the eyes as to the sense of touch. And it still gave out an ambrosial perfume it received when the Lord Dionysus lay on it, tipsy with wine and nectar, embracing Minos' daughter and fair young Ariadne, who Theseus carried off from Knossos and abandoned on the island of Naxos. These are just beautiful stories, right? Now, next image. Ancient sources are literally divided into concerning the fate of Ariadne, with one group of stories circulating that whether killed by Artemis or killed or even turned to stone by King Theseus, she remained dead. And another group of stories believing Dionysus resurrected her. It became so confusing that a third legend developed that there were actually two Ariadnes, one who died and one who became immortal, as recorded by Plutarch. I'm going to quote now from Plutarch. Some of the Naxians also have a story of their own, that there were two Minoses and two Ariadnes, one of whom they say was married to Dionysus in Naxos and bore him Staphylos and his brother, and the other, of a later time, having been carried off by Theseus and then abandoned by him, came to Naxos accompanied by a nurse whose tomb they show, and that this Ariadne also died there. So you have these various conflicting stories. Next image. Whether brought back from Hades or not, Greeks and Romans agree that Dionysus established the stars of the constellations of Corona in her honor, as noted by Diodorus Siculus. He says, Dionysus kept her, Ariadne, as his lawful wife, loving her exceedingly. Indeed, after her death, he considered her worthy of immortal honors because of the affection he had for her, and placed her amongst the stars of heaven, the crown of Ariadne, which is the constellation of Corona. Aratus also writes here too that crown, constellation Corona, which glories Dionysus, said to be a memorial to the dead Ariadne. So you have these various stories concerning her, but you do also have this idea of this sense of possible immortality, right? Let's go to the next image. The story of her apotheosis is as early as the story of her death. And so both traditions appear to have value. Hesiod records around 700 BCE. He says, and golden-haired Dionysus made brown-haired Ariadne, the daughter of Minos, his buxom wife, and Zeus, the son of Cronos, made her deathless and unaging for him. In this version, Zeus is the instrument for her immortality, yet he makes her immortal for his own dear son Dionysus. Next image. According to Quintus Smyranius, in his Fall of Troy, written around the 4th century CE, Dionysus brought his wife right up to Mount Olympus itself, saying, two great silver bowls, these had Hephaestus fashioned for his gift to glorious Dionysus, whom he brought his bride Ariadne, divine to Olympus, Minos' child far famous, whom in sea-washed Naxos isle Theseus unwittingly left. Unquote. In the 1st century BCE, next image, Ovid records a version where Ariadne does not even die, but is simply made directly into a goddess, saying the constellation Corona of the Knossos girl, Theseus' crime defiled her. She gave the ingrate the winding thread of the labyrinth and gladly swapped her perjured husband for Bacchus. He, Bacchus, embraces her, Ariadne, and mops her tears with kisses and says, let us seek heaven's heights together. You have shared my bed, and you will share my name. You will be named Libera. When transformed, I will create monuments of you and your crown, which Hephaestus gave Aphrodite, and she gave you. He does what he said and turns its 9 gems to fires, and the gold crown glitters with 9 stars, which of course is the constellation Corona. So, next image. Many Greeks, these are great images, many Greeks and Romans interpret her so-called sleep, if you hadn't noticed these images, on the island of Naxos as symbolizing death. She is sleeping, which means she's dead. And Dionysus awakening her as representing her resurrection. And so, one popular theme upon various sarcophagi, which we have seen, right, as well as images and art, presents to Dionysus as about to awake Ariadne in order to marry her. The imagery intended to comfort the mourner that their loved one too will be awakened and resurrected soon. As you can imagine, Greeks and Romans began to ask themselves, next image, if Dionysus could bring his lover and mother back to life, and even himself as the dying, resurrecting God, why not others? Why not us? Nanos records this sentiment, depicting Zeus as saying to Semele, Europa, glorified by Zeus's bed, went to Crete. Semele goes to Olympus. What more do you want after heaven and the starry sky? You bring forth the son who shall not die, and you I will call immortal. Happy woman, he says, you have conceived a son who will make mortals forget their troubles. You shall bring forth joy for gods and men. Whoa, so we are definitely going somewhere. I told you we're going to take the time to really unpack this idea. Next image. You can see these images are everywhere. And of course, you can see Dionysus is here, poking at her, hoping to wake her up in order to marry her. And so this will hopefully have a very happy ending. Let's go to me for a little bit here. I love showing these kinds of images because sometimes pictures are stronger than words, right? Now, I always like Jane Ellen Harrison, a famous philologist and ancient scholar. And she agreed with anthropologists of her day that Dionysus, quote, is one is in one of his aspects a nature god, a god who comes and goes with the seasons, who has, like Demeter and Kor, like Adonis and Osiris, his epiphanies and recessions. At his very mystic core, I have to say, this great classicist of the 20th century conceded that, quote, Dionysus is a difficult god to understand. Difficult. Walter Burkert, and I actually have some of his own notes over here. He lived from 1931 to 2015 from the University of Zurich in the classics department. Walter Burkert is a little bit more confident about who Dionysus is, declaring as follows. He says, Dionysus can seemingly be defined quite simply as the god of wine and of intoxicated ecstasy. Intoxication as a change in consciousness is interpreted as the eruption of something divine. But the experience of Dionysus goes far beyond that of alcohol and may be entirely independent of it, he says. Madness becomes an end in itself. Ooh, madness becomes an end in of itself. Mania or mania, the Greek word, denotes frenzy, not as the ravings of delusion, but as its etymological connection with memos, which suggests as an experience of intensified mental power. Wow. Nevertheless, Dionysian ecstasy is not something achieved by an individual on his own. It is a mass phenomenon and spreads almost infectiously. Wow, so much there to unpack. But by making the distinction, right, in mania as frenzy rather than delusion, Walter Burkert is attempting to liberate scholarship from the German Romantic notion, identifying two kinds of religions. Have you heard this before? One calm and intellectual. Let's go to the next image. One calm and intellectual. And so Apollonian. And the other ecstatic and irrational. And thus Dionysian. So you see right here in this chart, the god of sun, truth, light, and logic connects to rational thinking. And of course, the Dionysian tendency is the god of wine, festivals, madness, chaos, irregularity, blur the boundaries of self and nature. And so you can see that there's this strive between that which is of a dream, which is the most Apollonian states, and of course, between that and nature. Dream and nature, also perhaps civilization and also nature. Let's go to the next one. In fact, it's used all the time in characteristics of various books. So, Apollonian thinking, right? If you're Apollonian, you are a thinking person. If you're Dionysian, you're feeling. If you're Apollonian, you're self controlled. If you're Dionysian, you're passionate. If you're Apollonian, you're rational, you're logical. If you're Dionysian, you're irrational, instinctual. If you're Apollonian, ordered. Dionysian, chaotic. Apollonian, the dream state. Dionysian, state of intoxication. Apollonian, principles of individuation. Dionysian, wholeness of existence. Apollonian, value for human order and culture. And Dionysian's a celebration of nature, right? Um, Apollonian celebration, appearance, illusion, and of course, Dionysian, brute realism, absurdity. Apollonian, plastic and visual arts. Dionysian, it's music. Yeah. The musicians are the ones who are the Dionysian ones. Apollonian, of course, the Apollonian people have music too. Come on, it's just more structured. Um, Human beings as artists, right? And Dionysian human beings as the work and glorification of art. So you have this duality that will be used throughout. It's actually started as early as the 18th century, and it was used for literary criticism uh, by of just in general, not just ancient sources, but in general. So you'll see this all the time, and this will of course go into even into the 19th century, early 20th century. In fact, Nietzsche was very much into emphasizing these kinds of ideas. And Derrida was very busy destroying it. So there you have it. Um, let's take this down temporarily here. So we get the idea. Now, in E.R. Dodds, you're wondering who in the world E.R. Dodds is. He's actually an Irish philologist and classical scholar from Oxford University. So, great source. Lived from 1893 to 1979. E.R. Dodds' estimation, this mass phenomena of Dionysus, similar to what he calls the dancing madness, was connected and in phenomenology to what happened throughout Europe in the late medieval and early modern periods. Let's quickly see this next image. So many constitute this as a psychological state of mind, right? As much as a particular religious system, right? Details of this phenomena that happened in Europe included an incident at Liege in 1374, where certain possessed folk had come dancing half naked into town with garlands on their heads, unquote, in the name of St. John, and, quote, the crazy dancers of St. Vitius at Alsace in 1518, says Dodds, also had somehow were involved in this kind of phenomenology, accompanied by what he says is drum and pipe, and similar music to that of the Dionysian cult. So you have this idea that maybe what's happening here is actually a natural phenomenon, something that occurs every now and then later on they try to capture this mania and try to bring it back, or to just keep using inspiring these kinds of actions to occur, but that a lot of it is possibly psychological in nature as an origin. Let's go to the next image. Okay, so yeah, well, here's the thing: is that whether it's designation, Kurt Latte sounds like a right. He's actually a classical scholar as well. Königsberg, Bonn, and Berlin, 1891 to 1964. He believes that the mania involved various Dionysian cults, and the Bacchae in particular, and it better actually corresponds to the type where the individual manifests extraordinary strength and exhibits insensibility to all sensations, to the kind where the person resides within a motionless trance, which is more characteristic of certain Neoplatonic as well as the Pythia of Delphi. So he's saying that, well, no, Dodds, it's not that. It's not like this mass phenomenon. It's very much an individual mania, very much that is of this type. He says this difference, by the way, is important to Latte's theory, exposing the lack of evidence undergirding the assertion that the Pythia at Delphi, let's go to the next image, and the cult of Dionysus were somehow connected. I'll say it again. The lack of evidence undergirding the assertion that the Pythia of Delphi and the cult of Dionysus were somehow connected. Here, he explains the sharp contrast between the type of mania experienced by the prophetess of Apollo and the Bacchic initiate. He states that For the Pythia, it was, quote, hardly advisable to sit on a tripod while your body goes through spasms and convulsions of a Bacchic ecstasy, unquote. Also, Latte contends that the Bacchae, quote, nowhere are said to tell the future, unquote. And furthermore, quote, the month when Apollo is absent from Delphi and Dionysus is the center of the cult, actually during this time, no oracle is given at Delphi at all, unquote. Of course, one must be careful, I'm saying, of such sweeping generalities. And while the Bacchae form a Dionysian cult and may not display the kind of serene mania visible at Delphi, Orphism, which we'll talk about soon, arguably a Dionysian cult with a more literary and poetic concentration, may figure in closer relation to the mania of calm divine inspiration. So there is a connection if you're connecting with the Orphic mysteries connected to Dionysus, as opposed to the more ecstatic form that we see with the Maenads and Bacchantes within the context of the more frenzied form. There are many different flavors of cults of Dionysus, and so it's kind of like almost like one-sided. One final point: Latte's insistence that the Bacchae are not shown to reveal the future seems to contradict, I say, this is my commentary, what Euripides says in his play. I'll just quote Euripides. And this god, being Dionysus, is a prophet. The Bacchic ecstasy and frenzy holds a strong prophetic element. When he fills irresistibly a human body, he gives those so possessed power to foretell the future, unquote. That's from the Bacchae 380, section 1, unquote. Dropping mic. Okay, let's move it right along. Sorry, I had to give a little commentary there. You see how scholars all fight? They really do. John Cuthbert Lawson. Oh, he's a great guy from Cambridge, folklore and Greek religion. He's born 1874, died 1935. Yeah, it's a long time ago, but he's a classic. He believed, quote, a state of ecstasy was the highest manifestation of religious feeling. Let's go to the next image. Asserting that, quote, this spiritual exaltation was the deliberate aim and end of Bacchic and other orgies. So spiritual exaltation is the goal. He adds, however, it must be frankly avowed that religion in its highest manifestations was not conducive to what we call morality. Unquote. Ooh, morality. This is a 19th century man that's reacting to these ideas, right? In his opinion, the Bacchae of Euripides, quote, with all its passion for the beauty of holiness, is a standing monument to the excess of frenzy, and that these were no mere figment of the poet's imagination, nor a transfiguration of rites long obsolete, that it is proved by a single sentence of sober enough writers of later times. He says, the things that take place, now he's quoting from Artemidorus. so this is John Cuthbert Lawson quoting from Artemidorus from later times to describe that this was going on. He said, the things that take place at nocturnal celebrations, however licentious they may be, although known to the company at large, are to some extent condoned by them owing to their drunkenness, unquote. So it's like, it's permitted because they're drunk. What goes on in the Maenad forests stays in the Maenad forests. It's like Las Vegas, right? Well, anyway, Lawson's morality play upholding abstract codes of conduct based upon Greek notions of rationality and civility and crafted to stabilize the community into manageable conformity, was utmost in Euripides' mind when he created the character Pentheus. That's actually my sentence. Yeah, I'm so convoluted. Pentheus. Oh, who's Pentheus? Let's go to the next image. Pentheus. There he is. Pentheus was the king of Thebes, and he represents the rational side of human nature, upholding the city state, the polis, and the conventions of morality that maintain order. He would be, from an 18th, 19th century perspective, very Apollonian, right? um, and so what happens is Pentheus believed that this astounding scandal created by an upstart god through intoxication was causing their women to go, quote, creeping off to lonely places, unquote, and convincing these disloyal vessels to surrender themselves, quote, to lecherous men, unquote. That's from Euripides, by the way, the Bacchae 180 to 199. Now, on the other side of the equation, you got the rational Pentheus. Who's the other side? The great prophet Tiresias. Tiresias. So Tiresias' support of these mysteries, of these bacchanals, in Pentheus's estimation, could not be the result of a legitimate passion to worship Dionysus, but instead, next image, he accused the prophet of introducing a new god in order to advance your augur's business to collect more fees for inspecting sacrifices. It's got to be a plot. He perceives Dionysus as an instructor of lunacy who spreads a new disease and fouls the whole land with lechery. It's also from Euripides. In reaction to this offense, Pentheus must uphold the law at all costs and bring the foreigner, this outsider, to justice. Let's look at me for a little bit. Yet Pentheus commits hubris because he trusts in his own power to carry out his objective and not the gods. Tiresias scolds the king for his arrogance. He says, you rely on force, but it is not force that governs human affairs. Do not mistake for wisdom that opinion which may rise from a sick mind. Wow. Here, the prophet interprets Pentheus and what he represents as a disease needing a remedy, right? This illness may be linked to the king's inability to realize that his own non-rational animalistic tendencies, right? That he himself has a non-rational darker side. In any case, Dionysus realizes that his ultimate revenge, when he uses the king's incessant inquisitive nature for knowledge against him, perking his curiosity of the Bacchic rites to the degree that Pentheus is willing to demand the arrest of Bacchus himself, of Dionysus. I'm going to arrest you. Well, but his guards arrest instead this guy by the name of Ecotes of Maeonia, who was a sailor, who declares that Dionysus, hey, is indeed divine. In fact, his crew tried to capture Dionysus, and Dionysus turned them all into dolphins, which is not too bad. I mean, dolphins are pretty cool, right? But of course, the king does not believe and throws him into jail. And so what happens is that he's going to go ahead and since his guards are not helping at all, he's going to deal directly with Dionysus. Next image. And so he goes out, tromps it out into the forest. You can see what's going to happen now, right? And runs into a Bacchanalia and these women, these Maenads, and they're in a state of, well, ecstasy and whirling about, and so the participants uh, thought that he was actually a boar, and they proceed to tear him apart with their bare hands. Next image. Apparently, uh, this was a popular theme for many vase makers. This one's pretty gross. You can see that his top part is there, and he's kind of torn asunder there. There's another Opian. He is Oppian. That's not Appian, but Opian. He is a virgin, where it adds that Dionysus actually turns them into leopards, uh, and um, and then Pentheus is turned into a bull. Next image. This is just a great. This is from ancient times. This is really an ancient image of him, a fresco, and you can see he's getting what he deserves for not only. I mean, he's there to literally attack and capture Dionysus, and he runs into Dionysian worshippers. They're not too happy with him. And so this is the end of the so-called rationality, because that which is rational, if it's not balanced, becomes, especially when you do not respect the gods, that which is irrational. And this is what happens to him. Next image. So yeah, very popular. So if Pentheus represents the rational side of man's nature, Dionysus symbolizes, yeah, the irrational or the unexplained nature. In contrast to Pentheus and the newer establishment who he represents, Tiresias, unashamed of his Bacchic dress and ivy wreath, despite his age, let's just look at me a little bit, tells the proud king as follows. He says, "We have no use for theological subtleties. The beliefs we have inherited as old as time cannot be overthrown by any argument, nor by the most inventive ingenuity." He's saying there's some things that are just as old as time, and it's not going to change, no matter what the new ideas are. He continues, of course, man may claim the rational sciences, but it is the unpredictable element that will lead to his undoing. With this firmly in mind, the chorus in this play by Euripides goes as follows. It says, "Blessed is the happy man who knows the mysteries the gods ordain and sanctifies his life, joins soul with soul in mystic unity, and by due ritual made pure, enters the ecstasy of mountain solitudes, who observes the mystic rites made lawful by Cybele the great mother, who crowns his head with ivy and shakes aloft his wand in worship of Dionysus." Wow. So, so the idea of mystic unity with a deity is in some ways comparable to the Greek and Syrian Orthodox practice of hesychism, although not an outward display of frenzy, which is perceived possible through the sanctification achieved as a result of the cleansing abilities of certain ritual practices, i.e., the Jesus prayer. Therefore, one could surmise that the gods are still in ultimate control through what is unexplained and what is mystical. Of course, due to his irrational and unpredictable disposition, it was never a good idea to insult Dionysus, for his rage was proverbial. Next image. and he could inflict his madness upon anyone he deemed as either as tools or objects of his destruction. For example, when King Lycurgus ordered that all followers of Dionysus were to be imprisoned, the insulted god cursed the king with madness as he hacked his own son into many pieces with an axe, thinking he was an ivy plant. Next image. Next, as oh yeah, okay, we'll go there. We'll be there in a second, so we'll keep going. Next, a lord of the seasons. He declared that no rain would fall upon Thrace until the king was dead, and so his own people rose up, seized him, and he was drawn and quartered. This is the kind of power, right? Now let's talk about the Maenads. The Maenads were women who were introduced by the Dionysian rites into a frenzy with their name meaning raving ones. In Euripides' Bacchae, once in the moment of divine madness, the Maenads suddenly had superhuman strength. And they were able to pull out trees by their own roots and could tear animals with their bare hands, including full-size bulls. In fact, in their frenzied mental state, they tore huge animals and ate their meat raw at times. The animal aspect fully animated, you may say, right? No iron was said to be able to injure them, and they were impervious to flames. Next image. According to Plato in the Ion, once possessed by Dionysus, the Maenads were said to have magical powers, able to bring forth water, milk, and honey from the earth through the medium of their thyrsus. You can see the thyrsus right there. Striking at a rock or the ground with these shafts made of the wood of the ivy, as water bubbled forth from the earth, and as honey was described as dripping of their points. Next image. They scratched at the ground, and milky fluid was revealed. The Maenads wore fawn skins, wove ivy wreaths around their heads. Next image. And often adorned themselves with snakes, some apparently alive, who apparently did not harm them. They made themselves mothers to fawns and wolf cubs, permitted them to suckle upon their breasts. How much of Plato's description is rhetoric, legendary, or perceived as actual is a point of much debate. Let's go to the next image. As for the actual Maenads, we know that in the middle of every other winter, women from all over Greece suddenly took off their shoes, let their hair down, and disappeared into the woods, shouting out, "To the mountains!" as they left their homes and perhaps their bewildered menfolk. Next image. Of course, the man did not leave them alone, for it was legendary that those who offended the god were cursed with eternal. Sorry, the men did leave them alone, excuse me, because it's legendary those who offended the god were cursed with eternal madness. Of course, we saw examples of that. There's another next image. After a sacrifice of various cakes in the woods or high places, next image, they danced all night to the accompaniment of tympanium and flutes. Next image. In some cases, a sacrificial goat was brought forward, declared as the king, and then sacrificed to Dionysus, or in some cases, torn apart by hand and eating the meat raw and drinking the blood. The dancing was amidst torches all around, and they began to twirl. They would typically twirl in a circular motion, around and around, wildly throwing their unbound hair about into full manes while jumping and shouting, and often saying the word "Yoy." Next image. The music that accompanied it would build into a momentum, going faster and faster. And eventually, they would reach the climax of their mystical experience, feeling the frenzy of ecstatic euphoria or ecstasy, after which they then fell to the ground. Next image. The story goes that any male observer stood the chance of being torn limb by these women in the midst of their divine ecstasy. And so men did tend to stay away. Of course, myths were plentiful about unfortunate men who did chance to view the mysteries. Naturally, stories of orgastic feast and debauchery followed this ritual, and there's evidence that this may be true, at least in some cases. Of course, look at this image, women were not the only ones to celebrate the mysteries of Dionysus. With Euripides saying, this is an image of a male celebrant, with Euripides saying that blessed is the happy man who knows the mysteries of the gods ordained and sanctifies his life, joins soul with soul in mystic unity, and by due ritual made pure enters the ecstatic mystery of solitudes in the mountains, who observes the mystic rites made lawful by Kybele and so forth. So we know that men were still involved. It's just not in that particular ritual. When they're heading for the hills, they are uh, men are staying put, or they'll be torn apart. Next image. The mystery cult of Dionysus that mixed both men and women did spread to Rome and was established around 200 BCE on the Aventine Hill at the Grove of Stimula, the latter another name for the mother of Dionysus, Semele. Ovid notes there was a grove known either as Semiles or Stimulas, inhabited, they say, by Italian Maenads. Ito, asking them their nation, learned that they were Arcadians and that Evander was the king of the place, hiding her divinity, Saturn's daughters cleverly inside of the Latin Bacchae with deceiving words, unquote. According to the Roman historian Livy, when the Bacchic mysteries were first introduced, they prohibited men from partaking in the sacred orgastic rites. And at this time, they were only celebrated 3 times a year. But eventually, they were inclusive of both genders and open to all social classes. They also increased their gatherings to 5 times a month, with the more prudish Romans seeing these celebrations as nothing but a endless drinking orgy. At one point, the Roman Senate outlawed them and arrested them for their crimes. After then, the imperial authorities closely monitored the mystery cult, restricting their meetings to 2 men and 3 women and no more at any time. Wow. So there you have that. Uh, Next image. This is many Dionysian banquet halls were located throughout the Greco-Roman world. One of these was discovered in Ephesus, right above the Great Theater within a giant villa complex. I needed to dig out, but I didn't have a chance. I had pictures of me actually climbing amongst the ruins of this hall, walking through the very tall grass and looking over the theater there. Um, and so you have that next image. One Dionysian hall was recently discovered in Pompeii with an elaborate frieze called a uh, megalography. We see, of course, this is just really recent, within the last couple of years. And it was just announced this year. So you're seeing some pretty cool pictures. We see priests and priestesses, bacchantes and maenads. They seem to be dancing, next image. And some of them are playing a flute. We do see slaughtered animals hung, uh, sometimes on their shoulders. Next image. It's pretty impressive, right? One figure makes an offering of wine in an acrobatic manner with a libation behind him from a drinking horn. Next image. Dionysus is there at the center with Salinas, his companion. A woman nearby looks as if she's being initiated into the mysteries. And of course, And so you see that there. So these are pretty great images. Next image here. So you can see the animals there. Look at that. Look at that expert. So she's at the moment of being, apparently she's being initiated. And I'm not sure what that expression is saying, whether this is a good or a bad thing, but there you have it. Uh, there were also Dionysian mysteries restricted only to men. So we're kind of going through this. We have Dionysian mysteries, only women, Dionysian mysteries, women and men, and now we have Dionysian mysteries that are only men, and very restrictive. And we find these especially in Greece, mainland Greece, as you would expect, because it's a little bit more patriarchal. And so I'm going to read. I have to do this because I have to do this the point of contrast. I'm going to read um, what's called the rule of the Iobacchus. And what this is, it dates from 178 BCE, and it survives, and it is how you're supposed to conduct yourself. And I gotta tell you beforehand, this is a uh, pretty down in the mouth type of people. They're not really celebrants at all, and I wouldn't want to join their club. I'll just start off that way. Uh, so but this offers an unusual glimpse of a month-to-month life in one of these cults, according to the inscription. So I'm reading this from the inscription. The entry fee to join was 50 denarii, and they were to meet on the ninth day of each month, as well as on the day of the founding of the club. So far, so good. Each member was also to pay via a fixed amount of wine monthly, and if they failed to supply the proper amount of wine, they were to be excluded that month. I mean, I get that, right? Make sure you bring the wine. Their meetings were to be a very serious affair, with the inscription saying, no one may either sing or create a disturbance or applaud at the gathering, but each shall say and act his allotted part with all good order and quietness under the direction of the priest or the archbacchus. And I think to myself, what? It's like this is the opposite of what a Dionysian meal or ritual is supposed to be. I mean, no singing. I mean, Dionysus is all about celebration. It's all about mischief and chaos, but not for these down in the mouth gentlemen. Apparently, those of the Athenian chapter of the cult were prone to fighting. For the inscription further states, if anyone starts a fight, or he be found acting disorderly, or occupying the seat of another member, heaven forbid you sit on somebody else's seat, he shall pay to the society 25 light drachmae. Wow. And if anyone comes to blows, he who has been struck shall lodge a written statement with the priest of vice priest, and he shall without fail convene a general meeting, and the Iobaki shall decide the question by vote. The penalty, either exclusion for a period or a fee not exceeding 25 silver denarii. And the same punishments shall be imposed also on one who, having been struck, fails to seek redress with the priests of the archbacchus, but has brought a charge before the public courts. So if you go and you narc, you don't talk amongst yourselves, and you go tell somebody in the public sphere, in the public courts, if you do that, then you break the privacy and you are in big trouble. Well, I guess you just don't want to do that, right? As for the meetings, like I said, this is like you're getting the whole spectrum of the Dionysian worship. As for the meetings, the rule states the priest shall perform the customary service of the meetings, the drink offering for the return of Bacchus, and pronounce a sermon which Nicomachus, the ex-priest, inaugurated at the end of the public spirit. The portions of the offerings were to be offered to the priest, vice priest, and archbacchus. Get something in my eye, sorry. And treasurer, and then to Dionysus, core, Aphrodite. Also, at any other occasion, any legacy, sorry, or honor or appointment occurred in the member's life, they were to offer a special drink offering. The rule, the list gives examples of occasions, including marriage, birth, uh, and of course, coming into age and so forth. So the sacred meal consisted of course, bread and wine. There you have that. But there's other celebrations that were a little bit better. So you have these three types. You got these mysteries with the Maenads going off. You have the co-ed ones. You have these stodgy men, but there also were public celebrations too, in Athens and other places. So let's kind of go into some of these. Um, let's go to the next image. Okay, at the Linnea Festival. This is an image from this. It's kind of it's not a very good image, so I have a black and white one for the next one, but you get the idea. Um, but there it is, the next image. At the Linnea Festival, this happened in Athens during what they call marriageable months. That's January and February. And only comedy and tragedy were performed during this festival. Did I tell you there's a special connection with Dionysus with these two forms? A torchbearer would invite those in attendance to summon Dionysus. He would appear with nymphs called Linae, and this celebration was held at night. The Maenads were there to awaken, apparently, the sleeping god to spring. So you have this idea that Dionysus is underground, and he needs to awake to bring spring to come about, right? The next image. The next is, of course, called the Anthesteria. The Anthesteria is the festival of flowers, which is celebrating the spring. Dionysus was believed to be, as I mentioned before, underground, and he arose with the flowers to the surface, connecting to new life. In fact, he arose in connection to the rituals and the activities and the dances and the music of the women of the Maenads who are involved in these rituals, that they're doing this and it's bringing the flowers, but it's also bringing Dionysus to come forth. Of course, the wine is arriving during this period of time. The wine is fresh, which is not fermented, maybe it's grape juice, right? But it was taken to the temple of Dionysus and then given to the general public. So you have a distribution of the wine. There was an ox statue of Dionysus, although in some cases you have an actor dressed up like an ox. And what happens is this statue is brought to a place called the Bucolion. Now, this is where it gets interesting. Here, Dionysus would be theoretically married to the king's wife. And of course, obviously, this is all theoretical pageantry, right? And so the idea that the king's wife is married to Dionysus, this kind of goes all the way back to even rituals are very, very, very old. We see this also, this king, it's not the king and a goddess. In this case, is the king's wife and a god that kind of coming together to ensure fertility. And then, of course, what will happen is that the next day you have special porridge that's made. Apparently, it's really good. And then Hermes is presented with this porridge, and then the festival is over. And Hermes actually goes around the streets saying, the anesthesion is over. Go now, spirits. Go now, spirits. Go now, spirits. So it's the idea that all these spirits are joining them, right? And so we see in this that Dionysus is connected with life, but Dionysus is also connected very strongly with death too. Next image. So this is actually an image from this festival, you know? It seems like kind of a great time had by all, right? And of course, Dionysus is in the middle of it. Looks like they're doing the Egyptian, but okay, let's just keep on going there. Next image. This is I wanted to get this one because this picture is so rare and hard to find. But you can see there's a swinging action of a Maenad going on there. This is connected to the great Dionysia, which happens in March. Next image. Here, more of a classical image of it. This lasts for 5 to 6 days. Uh, you won't believe this one. In this one, dancers dance until they all pass out. And they get prizes. It sounds like something that's modern, right? You're going to keep dancing. Whoever's out dances everybody else. What a great time, right? Um, and so what happens also, many make their way towards the mountains, although the first day is about preparation. The second day, you got parades and sacrifices. The third day, you have plays being put on there, and of course, the aforesaid going off to the mountains. The last day, you got meetings, administration. It's like, okay, that was a great festival, right? Okay, so let's plan for next year. I'm not joking. But it's also the time where you get prizes. So you get prizes for winners for various activities. So next image. So it's a fun time that has had my own. Oh, this is another top. So keep this picture up, but take it down temporarily. So this is that but great celebration, right? Like I said. So there's lots of fun, lots of community things that go on. All right. Okay. Now, here we go. Of course, central to the Dionysian rituals and the celebrations, especially within a communal setting, in those town halls that I showed you, those the Dionysian halls that we saw at Ephesus. But there's those, of course, at Pompeii and all over the world are discovering these. Um, the typical meal that you would have, the ritual meal, was indeed bread and wine. That's a central meal. According to Tiresias, there are two powers that are supreme in human affairs. First, Demeter, who supplies humanity with solid food, that being the bread. And after her came Dionysus, Semele's son, counterpart to that of bread, the juice of the grape, unquote. So there's a direct connection to Demeter, connected to the bread, and Dionysus connected to the wine. Of course, the importance of the bread and wine symbolism continues on in the Christian Eucharist, right? In many ways, in fact, Dionysus in the Bacchae by Euripides appears like a Christ figure, because after all, Dionysus has a both divine and human aspect, right? Right, as a mortal mother and a divine dad. And he descends from he comes from a mortal mother, and of course, Zeus, the great father god himself. It may be said that Dionysus literally came out of the divine essence. Now, next image, divine essence, which emerged out of the son of Cronus' thigh. The last one we showed was him emerging. Now he's like standing up there. There's little Dionysus there in the thigh of Zeus. Because of this, the wine god is called throughout antiquity the one who is twice born Dithyrambus. From this perspective, he is not born once, he is born again. Dionysus also performed many signs and miracles. And when it came time for his trial, he was presented as gentle and humble, and he permits himself to be bound. There's various stories of him going under a trial. He's bound. Yet this gift from the gods is more than sustenance for survival. It is a divine blessing that bestows relief from the daily toil, and gives to life more than simply the bare necessities of life. So something more right there. In fact, Tiresias declares, here we go. Tiresias declares, when mortals drink their fill of wine, the sufferings of our unhappy race are banished. Each day's troubles are forgotten in sleep. For Dionysus himself, a god, is thus poured out as an offering to the gods, so that through him comes blessings upon humanity. Now, I want you to think about this. I'm sorry, I'm having some problems here. I want you to think about this a little bit. Okay, so here we go. So Dionysus, I'm quoting from Tiresias. I'm quoting, right? This is ancient times. This is not me talking, right? So we have this idea. So mortals are drinking their fill of wine, right? But you have this idea of Dionysus being poured out as a drink offering to the gods, that through him, through Dionysus, there's blessings that come upon humanity. That's a pretty interesting perspective. You do have, of course, Paul, as an apostle of Christ, saw himself as being poured out as a drink offering. I'm quoting from right here, being poured out as a drink offering upon the sacrifice and service for the faith of the brethren, and count it all, he says, joy. Now, of course, not saying one is following the other, but there is still a close parallel, right? There is still something that is going on. Like Dionysus, Christ's offering results in what? A special blessing. That it is through Dionysus the special blessing arrives. It is through Christ a special blessing arrives. The, the moral is best summarized by the chorus in Euripides' play, who says, quote, that he who best enjoys each passing day is truly blessed, unquote. The scholarship linking Christianity, next image. There we go. So this is a great image of Dionysus. Let's be there for a little bit. As the great, well, actually, I love the next image. This is the context of it. He is definitely the fruit of the vine, and he's next to Mount Vesuvius. This is from Pompeii, and this is before the top blew off of Vesuvius in 79 CE. So this is what the mountain peak looked like before the eruption. The scholarship linking Christianity with the Dionysian mysteries is legion. Of course, on the surface, the parallels are worthy of note. Naturally, much of the focus relates to wine symbolism, since Dionysus was the god of wine and constituted an intimate part of his mysteries connected to wine. And of course, the readers of the New Testament will readily admit that Jesus also refers to wine within some very curious contexts. Scholars like Peter Wick asserts that woven within the narrative, for example, of the marriage of Cana story in the Gospel of John, the story where Jesus turns the water into wine is a revelation that he is superior to Dionysus in his miraculous powers. For while Dionysus may create wine, Jesus is able to do one better, turning any substance, even water, into this wine, revealing he or whom he represents possesses supreme authority over the natural elements. Next image. Yet, it's interesting. Actually, take this. No, keep it up. Yet, transformation stories connected with Dionysus and wine were not unheard of within an ancient Greek context. According to Pausanias, who lived in the 2nd century, this is the town of Elis, which he's talking about. Between the marketplace and the Menios in the city of Elis is an old theater and the shrine of Dionysus. The image is the work of Praxiteles, he says. Of the gods, the Eleans worship Dionysus with the greatest of reverence, and they assert that the god attends their festival, The Thaia, the place where they hold the festival they named the Thaia, is about 8 staves from the city. 3 pots are brought into the building by the priests and set down empty in the presence of the citizens and of any strangers who may chance to be in the country. The doors of the building are sealed by the priests themselves and by any others who may be so inclined. On the next day, they are allowed to examine the seals, and on going into the building, they find the pots now suddenly filled with wine. I did not myself arrive at the time of the festival, but the most respected alien citizens, with them strangers also, swore that I have said it is the truth. Unquote. So here you have two of the components of the miracle of Cana story, the pots and the miraculous appearance of wine. Just the water part is missing. Scholars since Biltman have argued that the priests filled the vessels with water first, which then in turn became wine in the morning. Whether this is true or not, there are certainly many similarities here. However, more impressive still, next image. According to Pliny the Elder, in his natural history, at both Andros and Teos, this is a picture of the spring at Andros. So I didn't use a generic picture. This is really there. Okay. Water originated from a spring located within the local temple of Dionysus, miraculously transformed into wine on his feast days. So what I find is interesting here is in this case, the water literally turns into wine, right? This is Pliny the Elder. This is 1st century BCE into 1st century CE. So it is, right? Now, when were the dates of these festivities? Well, according to this Roman source and others, it was January 5th and January 6th is when the water turned into wine. Now, it's interesting, perhaps just a coincidence, that according to early Christian calendars, the marriage at Cana, where the water was turned into wine, was traditionally placed on January 6th. Coincidence? While in the case of the pots at Elis, we cannot prove that Dionysus turned the water into wine, the story circulated from Teos and Andros did indeed contain a miraculous change of water turning into wine. But in this case, minus the pots. So where do we go with this? Next image. Why do we go to Greek? I want you to take a look at this. In the Gospel of John, Jesus is said to declare, I am the true vine. Okay. Now, while the closest Jewish parallel of this kind of statement may be found when Jeremiah discussed the vine of Israel, Jesus does not use this self-identification as a metaphor, but rather as an emphatic assertion of his personage, and a mystical personage at that, relating more to the mystical context associated with Greco-Roman mysteries than the Hebrew Bible. And even here, there's something going on here. Take a look. As opposed to looking at I am the true vine on either side, one being the New American Standard Bible, one being New International Version, take a look at the word order and understand that it says ego, I, and me, am, hey, the, right here. And then says ampelos, the vine, hey, aletheia, true. Wait, I am the vine, the true. Well, that's kind of strange. I am the vine, the true. What's going on here? Well, if you're Greek, and some of you may be Greek watching this, you guys know what's going on, right? So what happens is that you have this idea of a substantive. So it is read, I am the vine, the true one. It's an opposition, right? A true one. In fact, it is a comparative opposition. It's like, I am the vine, the true one. as compared to what? The false vine. You catch that? Ah, there we go. It's all Greek to you, right? So they're all even here, and it's interesting, is the context. We do know that throughout Galilee, Dionysian worship was everywhere. We find images of Dionysus, in Sepphoris, which is located 4.5 miles south of Nazareth. We have images of Dionysus and other places because it's Galilee of the Gentiles. It's not, and so you have many Gentiles living there. You have a place called Caesarea Philippi, where we also found many, it's connected to Pan, but also worship of Dionysus. And so this idea that nobody knew Dionysus in this area is absolutely ridiculous. It was part and common to everyone. Seriously, the Dionysian mysteries, we find them all throughout Galilee and even south of Galilee in various frescoes and mosaics. We even find one in the synagogue. Are you guys getting my point? Yes. So is this like a whoops? No, it seems like it be a comparative. It doesn't undermine Christianity, but it does show that there is this comparison going on when it comes to the wine idea. Am I still whining? Okay. So there you have it. Okay, so therefore, the false vine of Dionysus, whose ways ultimately lead to death, of course, from this perspective here. So Jesus offering his shed blood, which is the wine, will then lead to eternal life. And so you do have this kind of comparative going on here. I thought you might enjoy just going into the Greek there. Well, let's go to the next image. Okay, so let's actually take this down, but we're going to come back to it. If Pentheus represents the rational side of the human nature in the Bacchae of Euripides, Dionysus symbolizes the irrational, or I should say, the unexplainable in nature. According to Tiresias, he says there are two powers that are supreme in human affairs. First, I said Demeter, as I said before, supplies mankind with solid food, and after her comes Dionysus, Semele's son, counterpart to that of bread, the juice of the grape. Of course, the importance of the bread and wine symbolism continues on in the Christian Eucharist. Now, I guess we'll go ahead to the image. Thank you, Margie, for indulging me. I just wanted to see you guys out there a little bit. One version of a Dionysian feast connects more to the story popularized by Orphism, where Titans sent by a jealous Hera consumed Dionysus. In commemoration of this titanic act, some devotees of the cult were said to have taken a live animal as a substitute for Dionysus, and they tore it apart piece by piece, limb by limb, literally eating the raw meat. Naturally, rumors spread that they did the same with live human beings. Whether this is true or not, that's not the point, although we did see some things happen with Maenads, right? So referring to Maenads and others as supporting stories connected to, well, cannibalism, right? Here we go. Now, why this has no relation to the Christian Eucharist, it has every relation to the surrounding perception of this Christian commemorative meal, since we know from not just a few sources, but a lot of ancient sources from Roman times, that the early Christians were actually accused of cannibalism. Even Pliny the Younger, as governor of Bithynia, says, yeah, he interviewed one of those leaders, these women who were called deaconesses, and he tortured her. And he found out that they eat food, but he was big discovery of a harmless type. That's a quote, because he thought that they were cannibals too, and he's Pliny the Younger, right? I mean, of course, the fact that Christians would declare that the bread and wine were the body and blood of their Christ naturally led to the presupposition that there was a direct connection between these two rituals. I'm serious. Now let's talk about blood here. For as we noted, both Dionysus and Christ were associated with blood and the vine, with their blood as the wine. And furthermore, that this blood did indeed represent not only death, but the renewal of life to come. Next image. We must recollect that the vine of Dionysus, to the ancient Greeks always represented new life arriving for the old, of life springing from death. According to many ancient Greeks, when King Theseus abandoned Ariadne on Naxos and she fell asleep, it was the god Dionysus who discovered her and made her his wife. This story was taken by many Dionysian devotees as representing an allegory of the soul awakening from death, that Dionysus had regenerative abilities, not only in nature, but also for humans too. Hence, Dionysus was proclaimed as, I'm giving you the Greek, he is proclaimed as Lysios. What does that translate as? Redeemer. With the power of deliverance and even the resurrection of for all. And the key here was the power of the vine, the blood of the vine that was the wine, the regenerative gift bestowed to all who chose to accept it as so. You see, the power was in the wine and hence in the blood for new life. Are you seeing any parallels here at all? Many scholars see a resemblance between certain aspects of the Bacchic cult of Dionysus and Christianity within popular perception. Next image. I think it's going to be more wine images. Yeah, I love this is an image of a wine amphora. Next image. That's good. Besides the fact that each of them contain mysteries, both Christianity and the Bacchic variant of Dionysian cult were perceived by the Romans in a similar manner. They were seen as sinister, even devious, in their approach to religion, appealing to women and slaves in society, and most importantly, bent upon sedition. The Roman suppression of the Bacchanalia in 186 BCE, in many ways, resembles Pliny the Younger's treatment of the Christians in the 2nd century. I want to say this twice. The Roman suppression of the Bacchanalia in 186 BCE in many ways resembles Pliny the Younger's treatment of the Christians in the 2nd century in Asia Minor. So what we see recorded by Livy, Livy writes during the 1st century BCE, and what we see written by Pliny the Younger in the first part of the 2nd century has not only parallels, but even has direct parallels to the point of quotes from one to the other. Direct quotes that you can see side by side. So that's what's happening here is Pliny is looking at how Livy understood the repression of the Dionysian cult in Rome. He's seeing a direct correlation. He himself sees a correlation with Christians in his province of Bithynia. And there's no room or wiggle room around that. So here we go. Pliny also greatly esteemed Cicero, who treated the suppression of the Bacchanalia as a precedent for treatment of any nocturnal rites, and especially those involving women. Besides these two strong sources of influence, the prohibition against the cult was contained in Roman law, and a bronze copy of the decree called the Senatus Consultum de Bacchanalibus has survived, in which the Senate declares, "Nor shall any persons henceforth make oath, vow, pledge, promise, or covenant together concerning the Bacchic cult. Let no one hold ceremonies in secret, nor do so in public or private or outside the city, unless authorized as above by the Senate." Unquote. That the oath and pledge of the Bacchae, as referred to as the Senatus Consultum de Bacchanalibus, still retain a degree of its previous strength, is evident in the rule of the Eubaci that we saw from Athens, right? Following a set of measures against those who would strike a fellow member of the club, an added clause stipulates that punishment shall be imposed also on one who, having been struck, fails to seek redress with the priest or archbacchus, but has brought a charge before the public courts. This demonstrates that even legal concerns were first the business of the cultic club and then the public sphere. Here I'm reminded of the similarity between the rule and the passage of 1 Corinthians. Does any one of you, when he has a case against his neighbor, dare to go to the law before the unrighteous and not before the saints, unquote? Oh, yeah, you remember that one, right? Even the details. Oh, next image. So there you are. There's the Bacchanal right there. So where am I? Even the details of Pliny's actions, right down to the very words. Let's go to the next image. And phrases he uses in relation to Christianity. This is an image of the Bacchanal. Is similar to what we found in Livy's text. Let's go to the next image. I want you to see this. I think it's pretty cool. Next image. That's great. Right, this one. These are great images. So I was supposed to show these, but next one. There we go. There's Pliny's name. Just how you get to it. There he is. Plain and Pliny. Okay. Even the details of Pliny's actions, right down to the very words and phrases he uses in relation to Christianity, is similar to that what is found in Livy's text concerning the Bacchanalia. Both the consul and the governor of Bithynia struggled whether there should be an age limit for regarding true guilt. Postumius noted that those of the Bacchic cults were only taking initiates under 20 because they were of an age more, quote, open to corruption of mind and body. Pliny perceived the same youthful age amongst the Christians, asking Trajan if, quote, a distinction should be made between them and the adults on the grounds of age, unquote. Both relied on informers and made lists of the names of those suspected of involvement. According to Livy, if anyone so named had made his escape, the consul would fix a day for the hearing, and if the accused did not answer to his name on that day, he would be condemned in his absence. For those named who were far away from Italy at that time, a less rigid would be given, unquote. Justice for this crime was meant to be resolved in Rome. This made sense around 186 BCE when the Republic standards were so newly fixed upon foreign shores. When, however, Pliny discovered these fanatical Christians who were Roman citizens, he entered them on lists of persons to be sent to Rome on trial, rather than give them an audience himself. Recollect Paul, who even as a Roman citizen and a Christian had to appeal to Caesar in Rome. The local government at Caesarea was more than willing to deal with Paul and his beliefs on their own. Tacitus may have also the Bacchic cult in mind when he describes the Christians as believing in a, quote, deadly superstition, full of degraded and shameful practices which deserved ruthless punishment, unquote. That's from Tacitus in his Annals 1543. There is nothing overtly deadly about Christianity. However, the Bacchanalists were believed to have murdered some of their members outright during the rituals, easily earning them that kind of reputation. The association with fire, as mentioned by Tacitus, in relation to Christians, all in the burning of Rome, also fits better within the Bacchic cult of Dionysus rather than Christianity, where one ceremony matrons attired as Bacchants with their hair disheveled, would carry blazing torches while running down to the Tiber, where they plunged them into the water and brought them up still alight, because they contained a mixture of live sulfur and calcium. Obviously, this would make the Bacchic fires with this mixture quite resistant to putting it out, a fire hazard by any means. Fire was also intimately a part of their aspect of their worship, so much so that when the Senate was attempting to subdue this foreign cult, the Triumviri capitulites were authorized to arrange watches throughout the city to make sure that no nocturnal assemblies were held. and to take precautions against the outward breaks of fire. Yet, if the Christians were associated in the popular imagination, or at least the literary upper class who read Livy, Nero's charge that the Christians burned down Rome would not seem as misplaced as perceived today. Of course, they are the same, right? Um, an earlier echo of Pliny's Younger's passage concerning the Christians of Bithynia may be detected in the protocol established by the case involving the Bacchic cult in Livy, where a foreign religion that was seen both secret and subversive were believed committing, which is called flagitia. Indeed, the crime of flagitia was indeed applied equally to the Bacchic cult and Christianity. Further perceived similarities between the Bacchic cult of Dionysus and Christianity include their often exclusive behavior, meeting behind closed doors and shunning the public act of worship, their central rite of Eucharist, and their foreign origins with an undeniably Hellenistic stamp upon it. With these variables in place, it may be asserted that the Bacchic cult helped establish the social and political construct, the stereotype, and the official lens from which the phenomena of Christianity would later be viewed. Of course, this very same lens often acted as a mirror, reflecting upon Christian perspectives of how they viewed themselves and their Christ as well. We must remember that many of the myths and attributes of Dionysus are to be found within early Christian iconography, especially within the catacombs, where Jesus is depicted as the new Dionysus. And what you saw with this image, let's look at me for a second. And what you saw with this image being what we'll see in the catacombs as representations of Christ with the long hair and no beard. Are you guys getting this? And he is declared as a new Dionysus. He's also declared as a new Socrates. These are people in that time. Even Justin Martyr, an early Christian apologist during the second century, does not deny that people are making this association. So where am I getting this? I'm getting this not only from Romans, I'm getting this from Christians living at that time. So of course it's kind of difficult for them because they're being seen as connected to the Dionysian mysteries, the forbidden ones under Rome. How would do it, right? Well, now we move on to our next our final. We are kind of closing up here, but let's look at a few images. I want to show you just a few right here, and then we're moving right on to the final section. And of course, this is a Christian Eucharist. Take a look at the raised hands. The next one is kind of cool. In many ways, this mirrors, of course, the Dionysian dinners as well. Next image. Or celebrations. There we are again. Those are all reclining. It's interesting because we know, obviously, everybody reclined at that time around eating, but there's similarities even when it comes to even the furniture. Next image. And here we go. So we go into Orphism as related to Dionysus. This is the final nail here. Okay, so while it may be said that Orphism today is better understood than when Guthrie wrote his classic work Orpheus and Greek Religion, we do still he still has much to say. He has much to say when it comes to commentary, as well as, of course, recent archaeological discoveries. There really does need to be some more systematic work being done on Orphism. So, but here we go. Orpheus himself does remain a shadowy composite figure, often blurring with another ancient singer by the name of Musaeus. And as a result, the two are often indistinguishable. Herodotus offers the explanation that Musaeus was the son of Orpheus. Martin Nilsson's general categories of Orpheus as the founder of mysteries and Musaeus as the author of oracles may work best to define a literary tradition that really includes both. This point is justified by looking at the tradition surrounding a certain Onomachritus, closely connected in the ancient mind with the Orphic epics. since he is described as composing Orphic poems and editing the oracles of Musaeus. According to Pausanias, Onomacritus took over the name of the Titans from Homer and instituted orgia for Dionysus and invented the story that the Titans caused the suffering of Dionysus. According to Herodotus, Onomacritus was exiled from Athens by Hipparchus, the son of Pisistratus, because of his editorial methods on the Oracle of Orpheus were much to be desired, especially by this tyrant and his family, perhaps even making some of the material up himself. But however, soon Onomacritus found himself in Persia at Susa, and upon this realization, the family of Pisistratus decided to forgive him and set him to work in their favor within the Persian court itself, encouraging the king to attack Greece at an inopportune time. But anyway, long and the short of it is we have this great legacy of Orphic myths. In addition to the works ascribed to Orpheus and Musaeus, we have also Orphic hymns that also are part of this. Much of this were in circulation around Asia Minor. And also, another internal evidence reveals that the author of many of these hymns was a follower of Pythagoras. And so we have a connection that many did believe that even Pythagoras himself composed many of the sacred writings under the assumed name of Orpheus and was also a follower of Orphism. Another follower of Orphism happened to be, of course, Plato. And Orpheus has everything to do with Dionysus, and you will see that in just a few moments. So, as for Orpheus himself, next image, we are definitely dealing closely to the realm of legend, of myth. The reputed date for the musical sage resides somewhere prior to the time of Homer, a likewise shadowy and uncertain figure and composer of songs, right? Ideally, Orpheus is projected into the heroic age. We have a fly in our pristine ointment with Herodotus, who believes that the poems of Homer were earlier than all the rest, Orpheus included. As for his place of birth, the Argonautica from the 3rd century BCE says that has actually Orpheus himself declaring his origins. He says, "Thence I made all speed to snowy Thrace, to the land of the Libythrians, my own fatherland, and I entered the far-famed cave where my mother conceived me on the bed of the great-hearted Augeas." Unquote. While as early as the time of Pindar in the 6th century BCE, Orpheus is mentioned as a participant in the expedition of Jason the Argonauts in search of the Golden Fleece. Most of the details of his supposed journey on the Argos arrive from Apollonius Rhodius, which dates around 240 BCE. Also, Valerius Flaccus from 80 CE, an anonymous poet from the 4th century CE. Despite the fact that Orpheus is not endowed with the typical strength of the other heroes on this voyage, he is possessed of the magical power of music, the ability to sing and play the lyre in such a manner as to stop the quarreling of his fellow crew members, move the Argos into the water of its own accord, make the dragon guarding the golden fleece to fall into a deep sleep, and even to calm the stormy seas, to make nature herself yield to his powers of enticement. In fact, at one point, he was even known to charm the crashing rocks as the Argos passed through his musical abilities. Let's look at me for a little bit. Beyond being a masterful, and I must add, mystical musician, Orpheus was also a leader in religious affairs, often officiating like a priest within certain contexts, whether performing inaugural sacrifices, inducting his crews in the mysteries of Samothrace, or performing purification rites at Malea. His prayers, in particular, were viewed as powerful weapon against evil and a force preserving good. Inevitably, we must bring up the famous story of Orpheus' descent into Hades for his wife, Eurydice. According to Pausanias, writing in the 2nd century, in the scene of Hades, painted by Polygonus of Delphi, Orpheus is present without his wife, leading many to wonder if the reference to his wife was secondary in addition to the story. Yet, with this said, we do have a very well known relief of Orpheus and his wife and Hermes, dating about 400 BCE, early enough to reveal that the story of his wife was already well established and may constitute another tradition for one that's followed by Polygonus. So, who was the wife of Orpheus? Who is Eurydice? Let's go to the next image. Well, um, she was known as the wild-eyed and the wild-voiced. They were truly deeply in love. In some versions, she was a nymph from Thrace, or even a dryad, who was so enthralled by his music that she fell in love with this mere mortal and decided to become his wife. Unfortunately, fate played the cruel game of taking Orpheus's wife all too soon, the victim of a fatal snake bite. Next image. According to Virgil, she was actually fleeing an obsessed and unwanted lover when she accidentally stepped on the venomous snake. Destroyed in heart and soul, and even despairing of life itself for his love, so torn asunder from his warm embrace, Orpheus casts his pain into a plaintive and pathetic but beautiful song. Unaware of his divine invocation, shades and guardians of the dead alike were moved to the point where the gods permitted Orpheus to enter into Hades and bring forth his wife to life and love once more. Of course, what happens after that? For this, we have two versions. In the first, less known version, Orpheus actually succeeds in his harrowing mission, and the sweetness of love is renewed again to the flower of spring. This is the version according to Euripides, and Alcestis, and the poet Hermogenes. Yet, according to Plato, Orpheus was only permitted to see the ghost of his beloved wife rather than receiving his wife back in flesh and blood. The intended lesson meant to demonstrate that the courageous act would have been to join her in death rather than cheat death itself. And of course, there is a version of the story where she's led up. He's not supposed to look back, but he does look back. And well, you can figure out the rest. And so we bring into the Orphic myth. Next image. What is the Orphic myth? Well, before we go there, I want to say what happens to Orpheus is he's pretty upset about his wife and women in general. And so what he does is he becomes a poet that secludes himself and seems to be at war with Dionysus. At war, and he has the gift of music. And so what happens is, well, he starts to favor Apollo. You never play games with gods. And so what he does is he starts to focus on worship of Apollo, the god of the sun and music, rather than Dionysus. And in fact, he was described as habitually climbing up the great Mount Panageon every morning to worship this Olympian god. After a while, Dionysus became jealous of Orpheus and his solitary devotion to Apollo and the Olympian order, which represented the polar opposite of his dark, wild ways. Resolute to putting an end to the charade, Dionysus set his Maenads, those frenzied female devotees of his mysteries, after Orpheus one night, and they proceeded to, yes, tear the poet limb by limb into tiny pieces. According to Virgil, specifically because of his poor treatment of the female sex after the death of his wife, a group of women, likewise in a Bacchic frenzy, he says, tore him apart. So we see this in more than just one source. Just when you thought it was over for Orpheus, there's more. Well, you see, while his body, what was left of it, remained in Thrace, the enraged women threw his head and lyre into the Hebros River. Next image. Where both head and musical instrument continued out to sea and onto the island of Lesbos. The head somehow singing all the way there. And and so we have lots of vases showing this just head going on here. So what is this? The myth that he sings is the Orphic mystery hymn of Dionysus. Let's go to the next image. And what is this theogony? Well, you see an image here of how everything goes. I'm going to just go ahead and one more image. Oh, I guess that image didn't show. So take that down. And those are the golden tablets. So we're nearing the end of our great sojourn. Yes. Okay. So those within Orphic tradition are fond of theogonies, and they have this head. I guess he was definitely ahead of his time. Spout out this story, this theogony, that will go into the very nature of what humanity is about. Here we go. This is really important. I can't leave this out of the Dionysian mysteries, the Orphic story. According to this story, the best way for me to do this I'm just gonna quote Walter Burkert, and then I'll make some commentaries and I'll have some ancient sources too. But he gives a nice summary because here we go. Zeus, I'm gonna actually substitute certain words. I don't want to use the word rape, but Zeus went unto, I'll be King James English. Zeus went unto his mother Rhea Demeter and sire Persephone. Wow. Then he went unto Persephone in the form of a snake and sired Dionysus. This would, of course, make Dionysus, this is important because you'll see where we're going. It's a lot bigger than this awful, awful theogony. And that is Dionysus, because of this, is mostly Zeus stuff. He's mostly spiritual stuff. He's mostly spirit. You guys got it? This is how you do it. Now, to the child Dionysus, he hands over the rule of the world, places him on a throne, and has him guarded by the Corybantes. Who's going to be upset by all this? Well, he's married. So Hera then sends the Titans, who distract the child with toys. And while the child is looking into a mirror, he is dragged from the throne, killed, torn to pieces, then boiled, roasted, and eaten. Zeus thereupon hurls his thunderbolt to burn the Titans. And from the rising soot, there spring men, rebels against the gods who nevertheless participate in the divine. For the remains that were rescued and collected, Dionysus rises again. What happens here? You're going, oh, it's awful. It is an awful story. But what it happens is this, and this is the big moment. This is a big moment in history. I'm sorry how it comes about. But here it is. Humanity then is put together from the ashes of the Titans and the ashes of Dionysus. The Titans are the material. Dionysus is the spiritual. So therefore, we have a titanic evil flesh and a Dionysian pure spirit. And so the mystery is, how do you get that spirit to return back to the realm of the gods, to have it resurrected as a new Dionysus? And all of a sudden, you just had an epiphany. Here it is. In this myth, the human condition is divided, as I said, between a divine Dionysian spirit and an evil titanic flesh. In the Greek world, the repressive titanic nature of man was proverbial, expressing an innate evil nature that is exhibited by disobedience, according to Plato, to authorities, parents, and laws. Right? This evil soma, this evil flesh, was considered a sema, or a tomb of the soul. So the flesh is considered a tomb of the soul. The followers of Orpheus gave this name Sema, right, tomb, especially to the body, because the soul is punished for that which it is punished, and it seems to have this covering, the likeness of a prison, in order that it may be kept in custody, sozetai, until it has paid its due debt. Oh boy. You caught it, right? Whoa, this is pretty, this is where it comes from? Oh no. Sorry. This is long before Christianity. Long, long, long. Plato's 300s BC. This goes back, way back, way back. So what happens is a correlation to Christianity, because Orphism, right? In Orphism, there is this duality between the spirit and the flesh, this inward and divinely inspired goodness within the person in opposition to the inborn evil nature stemming from wicked beings, whether titans or, well, of course, Satan, right? You have this idea, and his demons, and an afterlife with rewards and punishments. I know it's hard to give you more elaboration. The Orphic belief in the soul as a divine part and the body as the impure part of man gave a deeper meaning in the ascetic and prohibitions, and often dictated their conduct that conformed to Pythagorean conventions. They made them more close to Pythagoras. And so what will happen is many of these ideas have a direct, very direct parallel in the verbiage of the Apostle Paul. You know, but buffet my body and make it my slave in order to serve, in order to save. You have this dualism going on there. The flesh is holding me back, and evil flesh. Oh yeah, of course the flesh is not evil per se. It is hamartia, which means imperfect. It's only when you intend to wrong, in your imperfect nature, poniros, that you do real evil. But that's all Greek to many people. Of course, then if you're just bad, it's kakos. Okay. Concerning the dismemberment of Dionysus, Plutarch states as follows. I got to give you some sources. He says, it would perhaps not be wrong to begin and quote lines from Empedocles as a preface. For here he says, allegorically, that souls paying the penalty for murders and the eating of flesh and cannibalism are imprisoned in mortal bodies. However, it seems that this account is even older. This is Plutarch saying, I'm just not quoting him. Even before the legendary suffering of the dismemberment told about Dionysus and the outrages of the Titans on him and their punishments and their being blasted with lightning after having tasted of the blood, this is all a myth in its inner hidden meaning about reincarnation. Still quoting, for that in us, which is irrational, disorderly, and violent, and not divine but demonic, the ancient used the name Titans, and it is the myth about being punished and paying the penalty. And that's a quote from ancient times. Sounds pretty modern, but it's not. Plutarch argues in this work that to consume meat is unnatural to our true selves and part of the inferior titanic materiality tethered to us, arguing that we are not even equipped with the proper flesh-eating physical characteristics that are evident in meat-eating animals. Instead, he argues, we are to look to eat that which Dionysus produces for us, inclusive of the fruit of the vine. For Plutarch, to consume meat is to add to our materiality, our weighted physical and wretched titanic aspect, and so guaranteeing our reincarnation, as our fleshly selves cannot be shaken if we add to it. Wow. I mean, with everything, this member of Dionysus also connects with the agricultural cycles of the vine, as noted by Diodorus Siculus, who asserts that the name Dionysus was derived from the words hoino dosin, which translates as the fruit of the vine. And the reason why he was considered twice born was because first he was born when he emerged from the earth as a vine, considered the first birth, and then born again as each individual grape. Like his mother Demeter, Dionysus, as the vine, was from the earth, but he could only survive as a result of the rain arriving from his father, Zeus. Dionysus was therefore a result of both sky and earth, above and below, the physical and the spiritual. The crushing and boiling of Dionysus by the Titans, who were the sons of Gaia, mirrored the crushing and boiling of the vine to which the farmers did to make wine. Yet the fact that the grapes appear upon the vines the next spring in the same form as the earlier grapes represent resurrection, the new vine. Diodorus makes it clear that this interpretation arrives directly from the Orphic poems. The idea of metempsychosis, or the transmigration of souls, often identified with the Pythagoreans, marks Orphism in two ways. For one, it characterizes the following of Orpheus as believers in a life after death, of the continuation of the soul's existence as an individual entity before reaching the final destination, whether in the land of reward, in some cases Elysium, or in the realm of punishment, Tartarus. The soul is involved in a period of reincarnation, usually thought to last at least 3 cycles, if not more. Secondly, because Orphic circles held that a soul could reincarnate within an animal form, to kill any living thing was a scathing as committing suicide. Therefore, like the Pythagoreans, followers of Orphism avoided meat and animal products. As Burkitt notes, the apparent rival traditions of the Orphic and Pythagorean doctrines of metempsychosis are seen to coincide. When Pythagoreans from southern Italy, including Pythagoras himself, are mentioned along with Onomacritus as the true authors of Orphic poems, we see a connection, unquote. However, there are some differences between all three Bacchic, Orphic, and Pythagorean groups, since the nomenclature is based on different principles. Mystery, ritual, literature marked by the name of an author, and a historically fixed group with their master Dionysus as a god, Orpheus as a mythical singer and prophet, and Pythagoras a Samian of the 6th century. Even though the central myth of Orphism was Dionysic, the Bacchic tradition differed greatly from the followers of Orpheus, and furthermore, the two cults actually opposed each other. So there's still some opposition. This deep lying reason for this hostility appears in its true light only when we consider the transformation of the Bacchic sacrament, the homophagia in Orphic myth, since the central rite of the Bacchic orgia was the dismemberment and eating of an animal. You guys get that? While the Orphic ones are, no, we're vegetarian. The other Dionysians, see, we had different sects, right? Just like any belief system, right? People are broken up in different perspectives. So the homophagia literally means eating raw, characteristic of wild and uncivilized things of the forest. We eat when it's raw. And so you have this juncture there where there's fighting amongst them. Now, there's more. And this is we got page to go. That's it. The gold tablets related to Orphism appear to have started in southern Italy, spread to Thessaly, and then eventually went to Crete, with the various instructions and magical formula becoming more abbreviated as they traveled abroad. These gold tablets were buried with the ashes of the deceased. Let's take a look at one. According to the Appollonian and Appollonian gold tablets, Dionysus was indeed a central figure connected to the salvation of the soul. Both the Appollonian tablets in the second line declare, "Tell Persephone that Bacchus himself has released you," unquote. Next image. More importantly still, entrance, no, earlier, later. More importantly still, or is that the last one? The one that show up? Yes, there it is. Okay. More importantly still, entrance to the blissful life hereafter was initiated by the reception of wine. Quote, you will have wine as your honored gift. A rather curious addition that's referenced here in the tablet from Thury reference an immersion in milk, a magical formula that is pronounced as part of the deceased transformation. So milk is important. Of course, milk was directly related to Dionysus as much as wine. Milk was not only connected to life, birth, and even semen, but it was also connected to the stars. That what made the stars white was connected to milk. And yes, ladies and gentlemen, the Milky Way has been referred to that way since the 7th century BCE. You're learning too much. For example, Parmenides refers to the Milky Way as the place of the, quote, heavenly milk. According to Pindar, the souls of the righteous went along what he calls Zeus's way to the Isles of the Blessed. Posidonius refers to this road as the mystic way. As the early Pythagoreans, the soul was divine and originated from the stars, and so the righteous souls would go to the stars once more, to the Isles of the Blessed, which was mystically connected to the realm of heaven rather than of earth, and the road to get there was indeed the Milky Way. One of the references to the milk initiation is found in the document known as Theory 1, which I will read. But whenever the soul leaves the light of the sun to the right, I am well cautious, more than anything else. Hail you who have suffered the suffering, but this has never happened to you before. You have become a god from human. A kid has fallen into the milk. Hail, hail, you travel to the right, to the holy grassy meadow of Persephone, unquote. In this passage, the idea of one moving from God to human is equated with a kid falling into milk, and further identified with those moving along the right, connected with the righteousness as opposed to the left, which would lead, of course, obviously the right way will lead to the grassy meadow of Persephone, who is equated with the mother of Dionysus in the Orphic myth. The initiate was to surrender himself happily to the road leading to this paradise, this meadow, this milk of the Milky Way. Many scholars envision an actual ritual action whereby the initiate in the Orphic mysteries is bathed in milk, representing his ascent. Of course, there are some variants. For a while, the Thury tablets appear to understand the realm of the blessed to be the sky. The Appollonian tablets will refer to the Isles of the Blessed in the realm below, with the milk interpreted as representing the plenitude or bounty of the Isles of the Blessed. According to Euripides, the Maenads draw the milk of Dionysus from the streams and can even find milk by scratching the earth while under their divine frenzy, and milk will come forth. One Maenad was described as striking her thysis against a rock, resulting in a sudden spring of milk bursting forth, like Moses and his staff, right? Another golden tablet mentions the falling of milk as equated to moving from human to God. This is in the Thury document 3 of the golden tablets. Also, many scholars agree that the first 3 lines of this tablet originated from the Orphic initiation ritual, for they repeat again in another document, Thury 4 and Thury 5 as well. So here it is. I'm giving away some of the mysteries. Take them up. Let's look at me. We see a golden tablet there. Let's see my face towards the end here. So it says, pure I come out of the pure, queen of the underworld, and both Euclus and Euboleus and all the other immortal gods, for I too maintain to be your blessed kind. But fate subdued me and all the other immortal gods with star-flung thunderbolts, and I have flown out of the grievous troublesome circle. I guess we're in the grievous troublesome circle, right? And I have passed with swift feet to the desired wreath, I have entered under the bosom of the lady of the house, the queen of the underworld. I have passed with swift feet from the desired wreath. Happy and blessed, you shall become God, the opposite of mortal. As a kid, I have fallen into the milk. Yeah. Once again, the reference to the thunderbolt may be connected to the entrapping of the Dionysian spirit within the Titanic flesh, right? Right? The Titans turned to ash by Zeus's lightning bolt, along with ashes of his sun spirit, and so being trapped in this troublesome circle of life and rebirth. The circle or wheel was definitely a part of the Orphic mysteries. For instance, vases discovered in Apulus depict Orpheus speaking to Persephone in the underworld with two wheels hanging from their house in the background. Proclus, of course, this is now Neoplatonism, also mentions the wheel in relation to Orpheus. He says, this is what those who are initiated by Orpheus to Dionysus and Cor, which is Persephone, pray that they may attain to cease from the wheel and breathe again from ill. So, and of course, this reminds me of Hinduism and Buddhism and Jainism of samsara, right? The wheel of birth, life, death, and rebirth. Moving on up. There we have it. Release from the underworld was attributed to the power of both Persephone and Dionysus, as related by Appollonian 2 golden tablets. He says, now you have died, and now you have been born. Thrice blessed on this day, tell Persephone that Bacchus himself has released you. An ox, you leaped into milk. A ram, you cast yourself into milk. You happy one will have wine as your honored gift. The references to animals in relation to the milk are curious and may either connect with the kinds of animal milk selected or, many have said, refer to houses of the zodiac. The ram is mentioned again in Pelea 1. Now you have died, now you have been born, thrice blessed on this day. Tell Persephone that Bacchus himself has released you. And it says pretty much the same way. It says, an ox, you leaped into the milk. Quickly you leaped into the milk. A ram, you cast yourself into the milk. You, happy one, will have wine as your honored gift, and waiting beneath the earth the rewards the other blessed ones have. There's, of course, also as the soul descends, many of the tablets instruct the soul to keep clear of the first spring that they encounter. Most scholars agree that the first spring is the waters of Lethe, right? These are the waters of forgetfulness, which one is to drink to forget their previous life so that they may be able to reincarnate again. So you must, according to these golden tablets and other writings, you must pass this first spring, and then means, which of course this way you bypass reincarnation, and to seek the eternal life. You're going to seek eternal life without rebirth. Passing the first spring, the soul is to continue on to the spring of memory. Sometimes it's a lake of memory, which is located on the, remember this for notes, right? It's located on the right side of Hades. Although one tablet from El Therma says the soul is ahead for the spring on the left side of Hades. Oh, let's hope it's the right side. I don't want to confuse you. The variation should be attributed to the eclectic nature of these tablets in general, for they are product of popular culture. In the Sphagdat tablet of the 2nd century, a cypress tree accompanies this final spring. So look for on the right-hand side of Hades, it says, I am parched with thirst and I perish, but give me to drink of the ever-flowing spring on the right with the cypress. Who are you? Where do you come from? I am the son of earth and starry heaven. With the question asked, the new deceased knows to identify himself as part of both heavens and earth. And here it is, another tablet. The Appollonian tablet, discovered in 1969, says as follows. This grave belongs to memory, for this time when he shall die. On the right side of the well-fitted house of Hades is a spring, and close to this stands a shining cypress. And around this souls cool themselves. Do not approach this spring, but proceed to the lake of memory with cold water flowing forth. There are guardians here, and they will ask you with shrewd speech, what are you looking for in the deadly darkness of deadly Hades? So here it is. It's my conclusion too. Here it is. So as you're going through, remember this, right? So you're going to go to the right side of the well-fitted house of Hades. There is a spring, right? There is a shining cypress. Around this place, the descending souls cool themselves. You proceed on to this lake of memory of cold water. There are the guardians here, and they will ask you with shrewd speech. Again, what are you looking for in the darkness of deadly Hades? And this is what you're supposed to say. This is the key to the mysteries of Dionysus in connection to the Orphic mysteries. This is what you're supposed to remember, and here it is. This is the sacred words. You have to say as follows. I am a son of earth and starry heaven. I am parched with thirst and perishing. But give me to drink from the cold waters from memory's lake. And they will show you to the Chthonian king and give you to drink from memory's lake. And then having drunk, you will walk on the holy path of the many, on which also other renowned Mysti and Bacchae walk. You will drink of this water, this living water that will enable you to live again, to live for all eternity. This water is cold, it is fresh, it rejuvenates the soul, and it brings you straight into the starry skies of heaven, because you have recognized that you are connected to the earth, but you are also connected to the sky. And at that moment, you are liberated and move on into eternity. And that is the Dionysian mysteries. So you could see how important it is to know these mysteries in connection to so many beliefs, even widely held beliefs today. And I find these parallels very intriguing. It does reveal connections of our shared humanity, how we observe things in many similar fashions, and maybe how all these stories interrelate. One thing for sure, however, is understanding Greco-Roman religions within the context of Christianity. Whether one agrees or disagrees, there's still a very strong and direct conversation going on between them. Who says so? Early Christians say so, as well as Roman authors. If you're interested in finding out for yourself their own opinions of this, which I have mentioned, I will say you want to start off by reading Justin Martyr, who is considered a saint of the Catholic Church, who talks about the mystery cults and how they relate to Christianity. And you should also read Clement of Alexandria and his work against heresies, which also, or against the Greek, which also goes into really fine detail about that. And you should also read Irenaeus as well. I mean, I'm giving you names. So this is no mystery to early Christians, the parallels. From their perspective, truth is truth, no matter the source. However, they believe that they hold the uncorrupted source, the final interpretation. But then again, you'll have the same thing with Islam, looking back at Christianity and Judaism. It's not that people haven't thought of these ideas. It's the fact that how these ideas are put together. There's the old saying, people say, hey, your soul needs to be saved. Well, you got to know that there's such thing as a soul in order to know that it's being saved. And before you think, oh, that sounds like Christianese, guess what? It isn't. The idea of the salvation of the soul is very much Plato. It's very much Pythagoras. It's very much part of the Dionysian mysteries, which are long before the formation of Christianity. So we have to remember that too. History gives an important context to these ideas, if only we allow ourselves to research and find out for ourselves. Thank you so much and have a great evening.